This is Coda Radio, episode 281 for a spooky October 30th, 2017. Hi everyone, and welcome to Coda Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. This episode is brought to you by our two fine sponsors, DigitalOcean and Linux Academy. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. Why me? My name is Chris, but that's not important because what's important is our host who joins us from the swamps of Florida or perhaps from the outer rings of the solar system. It's Mr. Dominic. Hello, Mike!
Let me tell you about this new Ruby gem I found. I call it ruby.spore drive, and it's awesome.
Nice. Yeah, you just got to make sure you can control it and navigate it, because it's a wild world out there.
No, you don't. You stab that shit into yourself, and you go for it.
Oh, so I take it you've caught Star Trek Discovery. You've caught up.
Indeed. I'm you know what? Captain Lorca. This is my kind of military officer, finally.
Yeah.
Not a little pantsy like Kirk trying to bang his way through the galaxy.
This seems like the kind of guy that maybe Kirk might have looked up to. You know what I mean? Like, this is the kind of guy where Kirk's like, oh, so that's how you be a captain. Which explains a Star Trek captain-style progression from Lorca to Archer to Kirk now and to Picard. You know, you can see a clear trend. Like, it gets more and more bureaucratic as time goes on.
Really, it's like a legacy software. It's just, more crap, more rules.
Yeah. So you enjoying it?
I love it. And you know how I knew I'd love it, Chris? It was the comments in Ars Technica of all the Trekkies. This guy's evil. Oh my god, he's going to kill the Klingons. Yes, because in war, the basic way to win is to kill more of them than they do of you.
Now, okay, wait, so let me explain that. Oh, hold on. So the way to win is by defeating more of them than they defeat you. Oh, that makes sense. Oh, that's how it works.
I just want to, say that, right? Like, first of all, everything about the show is great. Like, believable. You know what? Like, the acting is good. The pain in the ass lieutenant, who's the science officer, is like every DBA I've ever met. Doesn't want you to ruin his pristine architecture and his pristine database. And then injects himself with some good old, whatever they call that, DNA. And really, who doesn't want an admiral with benefits? I'll just throw it out there.
What do you think, though, of them doing this behind an app? See, here in the States, you got to get the CBS All Access app. You got to pay the subscription.
It took 3 weeks for them to con me into paying for it. And then I did, because it's so damn good.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to stick around, too. It's a new era we live in where media companies think that they have some ability to become a streaming company. And they think, well, we can make the content, so we're just going to go ahead and internet this really quick and put it out there. And last Sunday, not this one, but the Sunday before our previous show, it totally fell down during the premiere. So they put the show up, they put it up at like 6 p.m. Pacific.
It crashed. Yeah, I watch it Monday morning because it sucks on Sunday.
Yeah, so these companies are going to be entering into a dark era of figuring this out over and over again. Some of them, I think,
Would you say that they're calling a black alert, perhaps?
Yeah, exactly. So we'll just be sitting back and watching the train wreck, you know?
So can we just take a Trekkie corner here?
Oh, sure.
So I know you are a bigger Trekkie than I am, though I have been
lifelong, you might say, lifelong.
Yeah, I'm not lifelong. I was a Star Wars guy first. But there's something realistic about the good Captain Lorca that I feel like Picard in particular doesn't really have. Archer comes close, right? Archer is like, he's almost believable. But Kirk and Picard are a little too, Jesus captains for me.
Have you seen much of Voyager?
I've seen about half of Voyager, the good Captain Janeway, right?
Yeah, she's got a few moments where she kind of loses her composure.
Decides to kill a bunch.
Yeah, I always love those moments with her.
Well, like the Borg. Let's just talk about the Borg for like a hot second. Remember the episode of TNG where he decides not to wipe out the Borg?
Yep.
That seems like a mistake.
Yeah, huge.
Like, I know they get better later, right, Voyager, but still, everything you know at the time.
To TNG's credit, they come back and sort of grapple with that later on in the series.
Right, that people die. See, I haven't seen all of TNG yet.
Yeah.
It's weird because I'm watching Discovery and it makes me dislike. Like, I've seen the entire original series. I've seen most of TNG, and about half of Voyager and half of Deep Space Nine, and it makes me hate the other shows.
Really? Because they're just they're of an era, the style and all of that.
It's not the era. Well, I think Gene Roddenberry really wanted like Starfleet to be good.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But and this is, Mike Dominick's opinions are.
But there's not as much interesting. There's not as much interesting story drama when everybody's good.
Well, there's no such thing as good guys and bad guys, right? There's guys and gals, I guess, but you know what I mean. Guys and
there's humans,
kind of people, right? And like Captain Lorca, if you don't know, is what we would call a war criminal. But if he wins the war, he's a hero, right? And if he loses, he's going to get butchered.
He's falling.
And we know. And the best thing is, he wins the war, like, or at least maybe not him personally, but the Starfleet wins, right? Like they come to an armistice.
Takes him a while, but yeah.
Like, you have to see. All I have to say to you, Chris, since you didn't see this week's, or rather, no, last Sunday's. I saw. Did you see the when the Admiral comes on board the ship?
Yeah, and I saw what happens to her. But I haven't seen the episode immediately following that.
I have not seen that either because I don't dare try to stream it on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And this morning I had a meeting, but I believe in this.
I've been enjoying it. It's been a nice,
it's been good, right?
Yeah, it's really nice to have a sci-fi television series that lets me turn my brain off for 45 minutes. It's been really super nice. I really appreciate it. It's
not that stupid, though. The only problem...
No, I don't mean it's dumb. I just mean I don't have to worry about work or projects for 45 minutes.
Episode 2, they show some code on the screen.
Yeah, it was like NTLM, like kernel, like...
It was... Well, there was the kernel code, but there was also...
I refuse to believe that. This whole thing makes me think this Mirror Universe now. I saw that and I'm like, oh, well, the Mirror Universe runs Windows.
This Navy has a bunch of subs that run
yes.
.NET, right? That's like nuclear subs, but it's the scariest thing.
So let's not talk about that because that makes me lose sleep at night.
Let's plug in this USB drive and boom goes.
Exactly. That's so freaky, dude. I just don't even want to think about it.
Yeah, well.
I know they got some GNU/Linux on those too, so...
Yeah, they're using OpenOffice.
What's funny is I won't say who, but a listener informed me today about a massive plant outage where they had people there working the weekend, and everybody was working time and a half, and everybody had to come to a stop because the central controller had crashed. But the central controller was actually fine because it was running on its own independent system. But the touchscreen that controlled the central controller ran embedded Windows 7 and it crashed. And so you had 60 people there making time and a half all day long, standing around idle because the power had flipped during the weekend and the machine rebooted. And when it rebooted, it blue screened. And so the touchscreen, just the controller touchscreen was out.
Oh,
it's awful.
That's really bad.
Yeah.
Have they not heard of the greatest technology ever, WinRT?
Well, and so this kind of almost leads us into our first topic because Windows 7 embedded would be quote-unquote boring technology in a sense. But there's certain kinds of boring technology that are safe bets, and they're not flashy, and we've orbited this issue a lot on the show. So it's kind of maybe time to just take it head on.
Yeah, so, a lot of people over the years, and it's amazing that it's been years, email in and are like, hey, haven't you heard of Rust? Hey, haven't you heard of Rust? You know what? Really, it's mostly just Rust.
Yeah, I mean, there's other things that come and go. Rust is the longest running thread now. It's to the point where it's like an inside joke between you and I.
Well, people love Rust, but basically insert Rust for any new hot technology that they think is important. And I tend to be, and I wonder where you come on, the more conservative side of life, right? Where if it works, it runs, and it doesn't cause, $50,000 to $70,000 of OT for a power plant, I'm pretty much okay with it.
It's really funny you ask me that because I was not even kidding 15 minutes before we connected our call today thinking how I've really made a transition in this regard, and I think I'm fully on the other end of it now. And that is, I came as cutting edge, as bleeding edge as possible, And I had a lot of good reasons. Mostly it had to do with certain requirements for production software. And then it also was about informing my commentary on air. But so I had all these reasons for being totally bleeding edge on all of the software we used. And over this year, since the beginning of this year, I have been smacked in the face over and over and over again to where now I'm on the complete other side of the fence. And you heard it in my recent coverage of Ubuntu, how I've sort of reframed my thinking.
I felt to the dark side, yeah.
Yeah, I've reframed my thinking a bit, and I've completed it now. And now I am, and time is allowed for this luxury a bit, but now I'm sort of like, okay, everything's sort of gotten to where I need it to be, and I'm going to level off here, and I'm kind of planning to level off here if I can for like the next 5 years. And I'm going to let myself just stay put. And maybe I'll keep a few test systems around, but I'm really going to hunker down on the boring stuff, and I'm just going to get my work done. I know it's a boring answer. I'm sorry.
I don't believe you, though. I don't think you can.
Really? You think it's too much in my nature to want to tinker?
I don't even think it's your nature. I think it's a necessity of like Linux Action News and a bunch of the shows.
To a degree, yeah. I think I think I have to balance it. I think some systems, like a couple of laptops, I could keep, just throwing crazy stuff on.
That's how it starts, but the problem is then you have to maintain these systems, and it never happens, right?
You might be right. I might be in a particular position where I have to sort of keep a certain pace. I don't know. Yeah. It's going to be an experiment because I'm in the process of doing it right now. This system you and I are talking on is the first one of many.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be very curious to see what happens. Myself, I keep wanting to find like one stable platform.
Yeah.
And every time I finally pick a platform, it goes out of support. Angular.
Yeah, and this is a real challenge, and it's really in all of the major tools we use, from the operating systems to the toolkits. Insert toolkit of choice here, and you could say the same thing, right? Or language even. It's a multi-layered problem. That's why I think we grapple with it often on the show. But there's a certain compromising that starts happening, and that's where one of the things I used to bump into is I don't want to compromise my enjoyment of learning about new technology just so that way I can punch the clock. And I felt like that was me sort of submitting in a way to, but in the reality is it's just really, it's more about saving my nerves and just keeping things working and being able to do a good job at my core work. So I'll give you an example, because what I really struggled with was, and we'll bring this around to programming here in a second because it's an equivalent. What I really struggled with when I ended the Linux Action Show is a lot of times, not always, but many times, if I was trying to decide between a proprietary product and an open source solution, even if the open source solution maybe had more negative ramifications and required more fiddling, I would choose the open source thing so that way I could cover it on Linux Action Show and we'd sort of stay in, keep everything open source. It sort of was like a win-win there. Now, after Linux Action Show, that necessity kind of began to fade away. And I had to reevaluate things on a more merit-based system. And I began to really panic about my desktop, because if I switch that out, it re-changes my entire workflow. Because I had to honestly ask myself, if I'm going to go buy a effing expensive MacBook Pro Touch Bar so that way I can use Final Cut Pro, would it not just make sense to just install Brew, install iTerm, get Mac OS as Linuxy as possible, and then install virtualization for anything that it doesn't cover the gaps on, and just buy one machine, have one computer, and just use the boring Mac OS that drives you crazy? And I had to really, ask myself that, because that'd be a major retooling. I ended up landing on Ubuntu 17.10. But it's one of those things where when you start this process, you will be surprised how far it takes you, like how far that rabbit hole is. You might think it's Angular, you might think it's Objective-C, but it's actually the entire way you work.
You're trying to trigger me by mentioning Objective-C. I felt the trigger. I'm holding it back. I will send you to do a peace treaty with Klingons. Don't think I won't.
It was smooth though. I mean, at least give me that. I mean,
Yeah,
not to
it
take
was
away from your cleverness to catch it, but that was a smooth insert.
I obviously, as has been recorded and commented on numerous times, have very hostile feelings about certain programming languages that have now replaced Objective-C. I still think that So, I agree with you, but I'm going to take it a step further. I'm not going to take the Swift bait. I'm not doing it.
You're a bigger man than I am.
No, it really is. Like,
yeah, I agree. I know it's funny because we made a Star Trek. We started with Star Trek.
You can moan. You can do every little side hack to work on Linux or work on Objective-C or whatever your little pet pony is, and you're not. No one man can change the tide, right? You're not going to win. I kind of don't think you should care, to be honest with you.
Oh boy, okay.
If working on Mac OS, teardrops, would be easier and more efficient and like a one-time cost that would be over, then you should just do that. And if working in Swift is more, I will let you trigger me here. If I can't sell something without saying we'll do it in Swift, then I have to do it in Swift, right?
Yeah, no, I agree, but
like that's all that. Like that's all that means.
Do you have that voice in the back of your head that goes, "Well, then why are you working for yourself, you dumbass? If you're just making these compromises that you would just make if you punched the clock."
Oh, his life is compromised, right? Like you could be the president, and you still have to compromise so that they don't indict your son. Oh, jeez. Yeah, Paulie. He's got a nice house for sale in Manhattan, though. Life is compromised. Like, and this is actually something I think, just to take a tangent, like some of our listeners write in and say, "Oh, you guys are self-employed. You do whatever you want." Actually, no. Like, okay, theoretically, Chris and I could say, you know what, we're just not showing up to work today, but then we don't get paid.
It never works like that. Yeah.
That like regular W-2 people, especially people working in like big enterprises, actually have more functional freedom.
Yeah.
Because they get PTO and like there's a process to fire them.
They have sick time. There is a process to be fired, and on top of that, you can sort of slip into the stream and nobody notices you. You can lay low when you're having a bad week. There's no laying low when you're running the business. Well,
and I have an extra layer of pain that Chris doesn't. Not to like measure our scars here, but I have payroll. And fun fact about the IRS and payroll: you are personally liable for payroll taxes despite the corporation existing.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, even if things went south, I would still be on the hook for that.
Yeah, I defer so much of that stuff to Angela. I'm very thankful for that, because that stuff.
You don't have W-2 employees, though, right? So you don't even like. There's a whole level of pain that you're not.
I think we did, but we don't currently. I think everybody is contract now.
Yeah, it's one of those things where once you have like a physical space and you start requiring people to go there, the like monthly payroll deposit just becomes super real.
Yep. Yeah. And then depending on how many you have, there's also like, then all of a sudden you have to start paying a ton of money for health. But I think I want to get back to your core point, and because we do also get the common question about self-employment versus getting a job versus continuing education, all these options that sometimes people are faced with. And there is a certain loss of flexibility when your business gets older, or whatever the term might be. When your business has been around for a while, you sort of develop these paths, this momentum behind things, and so it does become considerably harder to sort of break out of that and do big new things or change things, because you have an existing product line to support, and it takes away some of the flexibility and freedom that you supposedly dream up you have when you're creating your own business. Not that I couldn't, I suppose, go in and ruthlessly reorganize the network and change things and make room, but they would also be risking massive revenue loss and subscriber loss and all of that. So it's you sort of create your own box, and then you have to work within it. And I don't really feel like it gets that much different than a regular job sometimes, other than if everything, at the end of all of it, things work out. you maybe are in a better position long term, but that's a gamble. Boy, is that a downer? Should we? I mean, we went from boring tech to this, but it does answer.
Yeah, we found a dark place.
We do that sometimes because it's like I guess it's more like bursting the hype bubble for certain things. Like right, we've been through it and that hype's a little off. We just got to tell you, it's the truth.
Yeah, the hype isn't great.
The hype isn't real. Yeah. So what about you? You asked me, but what about you? Mr. Galago and MacBook over there and Swift and Objective-C. Like, where are you at in this process? What's your current thinking?
I mean, I think you have to pick your battles, right? I don't. It ultimately doesn't matter. I mean, not to channel the good Captain Lorca. It's the theme of the show, by the way. But you don't get credit for losing, but being like a FLOSS zealot, in my mind, at least.
Wow. Yeah. You
get credit for winning and being like less evil than the next guy. But really, you get credit for winning.
Yeah.
Right.
I suppose.
So I don't think it matters. I mean, I like Pop! OS. I like Linux. I obviously like System 76, much to the chagrin of some people. But it's not like I would give up iOS work to use it 100% of the time, because that would be crazy, right? And to be honest, much like the my man Jack Ma, I have a very mercantilist view of the world.
Aren't you just muddying your brand then? I mean, because one of the things is if you rejected all iOS development, then you would come out strongly as a open standards, open formats, open source shop, and so people might be more inclined to come to you. Or the reverse, you drop all that stuff and you become a hardcore, iOS shop with all these high ideals about design and whatnot, and your brand becomes sort of aligned with that mentality. But when you do sort of this in-between thing where you dabble in the open source and the Linux, and you got some steady business coming on the iOS, it sort of sends a mixed branding message, don't you think, for Buccaneer?
Oh, well, it's actually mostly the Mad Botter now.
Okay.
But that is one way to think. I mean, the problem with that is it works to a point. So let me see if I understand the argument. You're saying like you could just like totally abandon like hybrid and bots and all that and just say like you're a high-end iOS shop.
Well, no, or
and that's it.
Or you go all in on, say, okay, let's put another context to make it a little more reasonable to fit with the context of Mad Botter. You go all in on bots and the back end is Linux, and you really just, go all out to promote the open source or open whatever.
So that's like a thing that I've been considering and like almost did, right? The problem is then you're talking about a dip in revenue that requires layoffs and to get outside capital, which is something I looked into at the
This is what I was just saying about how you
summer.
have projects that have momentum and now you're sort of stuck to them, and
like one of the problems I have, like, is if I was starting from nothing again, I probably would not do too much consulting.
I'm really surprised to hear you say that, to be honest.
Because I had but like
it was a
really
battle the
nothing.
entire time. It was a battle.
Well, back in the day when I didn't have high living expenses, right?
Yeah.
I didn't have employees. Like now it's almost it's very hard to not, like, I feel a lot of pressure in terms of Alice. Because every day I'm getting a Slack message from somebody who's a subcontracting client that wants to talk to me about nonsense is a waste of my time, right? So, like, I literally got one while we were on the air here, and like, I'm like, what do you want? Like, go away. I don't, and that might be my thing. Like, I'm trying to get away from subcontracting. I don't like subcontracting. But I feel strongly that if you have a contract, you should honor it and not ghost on people.
Sure.
It is true, right, that every day, week, month I spend building subcontracting for another company. Now, I'm not saying this is different for individuals. If you're an individual freelancer, your whole business is just like subcontracting usually. I'm really building their product in their business and not mine, and I'm getting more and more behind. And I particularly feel this with Alice because of we got some press and a few other things. Like we were in the Next Web and not the Next Web rather, but in Beta News and a few other places that I can't recall off the top of my head.
But it was hard to capitalize on that sort of immediate spike in momentum.
Well, it was impossible
because you have to respond instantly.
Respond instantly. You have to somehow sustain yourself, and it
takes all of your focus. It would really to do it completely. It could really just be the one thing you do.
It is not a path I would likely pick again, I guess. But again, you have to put yourself, I'm putting myself in the shoes of a 19-year-old listener who, is trying to get out of school and move out and live on his own or her own. And you have to pay rent, right? I get it. I understand how these things happen. But the problem is you never really get ahead. And I don't remember your original question. I'm sorry.
Well, you kind of answered it. You really actually did. Boy, it's funny how you and I are experiencing very similar things right now.
You have a product, right? You have the shows.
I have the shows, and then I have new things that I'm trying to start that require significantly more time, but have even greater potential, but I can't get off the ground. And yesterday, actually, marked a year that I've been trying. And it's a hard milestone to look up at the clock and go, oh shit, I've been heads down at this for a year and I've gotten pretty much nowhere. I mean, there are some other significant secondary benefits that I'm very thankful for have come along, but the primary objective has not been accomplished. And I guess I'm not used to that. It felt like a few years ago, if I set my mind to something, it would come to fruition. I could, if it was a product I wanted to create for the network, I would get everything together and it would launch and, we'd be up and going. And, now it's just not really possible because there's so many other responsibilities and so many other things that take my attention. It's like I need some, I wish the business made enough money that I could hand off a significant amount of my work to somebody else.
I mean, of course.
Because if we can't launch new shows and grow into new markets, then how are we going to continue to grow? And things have been tight for years. I'd like to get to a point where we're feeling at least comfortable, because after years and years of getting by the skin of your teeth, it starts to get old. And
the thing I'm starting to realize is the only way up is going to be down.
Yeah, you got to slim down and have less things that you're responsible for.
Well, I'm even going to be more blunt. You may just have to lose money, right? You may need to take a financial loss or, whatever, cut costs, whatever you need to do. Because in a lot of ways, I think it's slightly different though, because you can get residual revenue off the shows, where for the way my business is structured, I can't. Right? I always have a need to fill more and more work. And I'm in an interesting place where I have some great clients, most of them are listeners to the show. Then I have some terrible clients who aren't.
Funny how that works.
Something that seems to be happening is the terrible clients have much more overhead on their projects and they're just not worth enough money. And I don't know if that's there are a lot of complicated things around agile development versus fixed bid, and perhaps can subcontracting ever work if a shop is subbing to another shop? Is there enough margin there that everybody leaves happy, or does somebody win and somebody lose, and that's kind of the way it goes? That is a problem, and to be clear, this is all a problem of growth, right? This is we may be getting bigger than some of our legacy, other shops who would sub to us. Because it becomes very hard to justify the rate they pay us, given that some of them have these illusions, right? That they're not subbing to a shop, they want to pretend whatever. Right. It's it becomes costly to maintain that.
It is.
So we got it on a whole different topic here, but yeah.
Yeah, but you and I are fighting the same battle at the same time right now, because that's exactly where we're at. I have some big decisions I have to make in the next couple of months, and the stuff that I'd hoped that would be spun up in time didn't work out.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I'm really bad at breakups. I've known that relationships should end, and I've kept them going for like months because I just why have the fight now? And I think I get the impression that you're kind of the same way. And I don't mean personal relationships. I mean like whatever, right? Any kind of relationship. It can be. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I can't really think of a way to transition to the next point we had in here about how regular, good old classic SQL, good old boring SQL seems to be, at least to some degree, at some sections of the market, replacing NoSQL or NoSQL. And you're seeing a lot of the big vendors like your Amazons and of course your Azures spinning up hosted cheap SQL. And you're also seeing now SQL Server from Microsoft on Linux. It's like the resurgence of SQL. I thought the trend
really
was
resurgence.
NoSQL. I thought we were all
It never
done.
went down. It was all hype.
Oh man, I've been fooled the whole time.
Yeah, I put this one in the notes because this is one of those dangerous things, and it kind of ties into our first entry here.
Yeah.
Where the hipsters on YouTube, not me, of course, and the bloggers are all talking about something new, but in reality, like 98% of what's actually productive, and I define productive as making money, is using regular old, tried and true, in this case, SQL versus NoSQL.
Of course. Yeah. And so you think this is just the hype bubble popping and the news cycle correcting itself? Because what it also doesn't mean is it also doesn't mean that NoSQL is going away, right? It just means that both are still successful products. That's really what it means.
In my mind, like NoSQL is a specialty tool for certain cases, but the default position is like Postgres or MySQL or something like that, right? Regular SQL.
Dude, everybody knows that SQL is a special use case. Otherwise, you just use Access. Duh.
To a dark and dangerous road we've gone down.
DigitalOcean.com. Go over there, create an account, and use our promo code CODERDIGITAL. You can spin up some really great systems on their really fast infrastructure. They call them droplets, and you can get spun up in less than 55 seconds. And they got data centers all over the world. And every type of instance you deploy is using all SSDs. Every type of instance gets the 40 gigabit connection. Every type of instance can take advantage of block storage and object storage and snapshots. It's a really good system. And now they're offering floating IPs and load balancing. And like I mentioned, object storage is brand new. You can get it on a free trial right now, which is really cooking with gas. If you use our promo code CODERDIGITAL, you get the $10 credit, and then you try out the object storage 2 months for free. I'm using block storage myself. I love it because I can just slice off, like what I did recently was I sliced off 100 gigabytes. And I allocated that to one of my rigs, and it shows up as just a dev device. So I can't remember, but essentially it shows up as /dev/SDB. And you just use that. I fired up my partition editor, made a partition, made a quick entry in FS tab, rebooted, boom. 100 gigabytes of storage immediately. And I did all that because I just want to do it the hard way because I was being a dork over SSH. But there's so many different ways you can manage storage, and so many different ways you can protect yourself from screwing up, like with snapshots or transferring a system. You can also transfer it to a different account, so that's great for setting up for like a contract or a friend or a family member that needs a website. DigitalOcean.com. Just get started by using our promo code CODERDIGITAL. You just need a new account, you apply that, you get the $10 credit, and boom! You just supported the show. Naturally sourced, small batch, developed locally, deployed globally. I just made that up right now. They can take that. DigitalOcean.com. Use our promo code CODERDIGITAL. Oh, and by the way, check out their how-tos because they've got a recent post on the 27th of how to set up Let's Encrypt with an Nginx server on Ubuntu 16.04. So you get the whole shebang. Nginx, you get a nice HTTPS connection using Let's Encrypt, and it is well written. That's one of the things they're super, super good at. And including adding the PPA to get certbot and all of that stuff. DigitalOcean.com. Use our promo code CODERDIGITAL. And a big thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring this here show. So should we keep our trend of talking about uncool things and things that were cool before they weren't cool and now are cool again? Because I feel like we're kind of in a groove now.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so I noticed that you had some notes here on the 40-year-olds at the pep rally, and I will say I'm still a few years off from 40, so I take offense to that, sir.
Good, you should. So I've had a weird problem, Chris, and let me do the war story part of this first.
Sure, okay.
You remember good old AngularJS?
Wow. Yes, of course.
You know, people act like it's legacy, but it feels to me like I woke up yesterday morning, it was brand spanking new, and now it's crusty and old, right?
Yeah, that's how it works.
Well, except when you're working in the enterprise, that's not how it works.
No,
right?
no, it is not. No, it is not.
And a lot of enterprises have a problem now, and the problem is Angular 1, let's just call it AngularJS, is not super supported going forward, and the upgrade path to Angular 2 or Angular 4, because God forbid we have an Angular 3, is like basically a rewrite for all intents and purposes. So I've had to field a lot of like, well, where do we go? This is a problem. We thought Angular was the conservative choice, and and people are going to write in and say, well, Angular came out 5 years ago. For enterprise intranet applications, 5 years is nothing.
Oh no, yeah.
Right? Like I feel like, and I'm sorry, hippies, but I'm going to beat up on you a little bit. The FLOSS community,
damn,
especially like the web JavaScript community,
oh damn,
doesn't get it. They're like, your end of life isn't 5 years; it needs to be like 10 years.
Yeah.
And once you call it 1.0. You should have backwards compatibility.
Yeah.
And or at least an easy upgrade path. That's like 40 hours of work or 100 or maybe even like 80 hours of work, not a rewrite.
You know how you were talking about you just can't really fight the market forces and one man can't change the tide of the trend? This is so true in enterprise. Whether you build it to last that long or not, they will use it for that long, regardless.
But they do all kinds of crazy bad stuff to try to make that happen.
Oh yeah, man.
I used to always wonder in like the early 2000s, how did Microsoft get the position that they had, right? Let's say in the early 2000s, late 90s, right? Particularly 2000 to like 2006, right before the iPhone. And the answer was because Microsoft, for all their vagaries, swore on a stack that if you bought MSDN, this shit would work for 10 years. Right? Like that was the deal. No matter how bad, how hard it was to develop with, it worked. And I subscribed to the Angular mailing list, and I'm just totally shocked by the tone deafness of the people there. Like, I don't know if maybe there's just more money in San Francisco. I mean, I don't mean to like beat up on California people, but do you really just rewrite everything every 6 months? Is that what's happening?
I've always felt like it's because somebody wants to create something. They want to make the thing. And so it's just you keep having these rebuild it from the ground up or forks every so often. Essentially, I don't know, 6 months, but yeah, frequently. And sometimes it's not individuals. Sometimes it's entire companies.
Like I sincerely believe that. I love open source. I think if you have a great idea for a FLOSS project, you should do it. But I also think that we need to have a serious culling of the week in terms of JavaScript frameworks. And we sort of are, but I particularly was very burned by Angular. And I get it. I mean, we talked about this a couple months ago and people emailed in, hey man, it's been almost 5 years. And now it has actually been 5 years. But that's not long enough. Like, it's just not. And I have the same problem with Ionic and Ionic 2 and Ionic 3. Like, Ionic 1 is still, in my opinion, the best version of Ionic because it's the simplest version. And you just can't introduce massive new concepts into your framework and call it the same thing.
Well, so I would propose to you that this problem isn't really going away. And every time that there is a new fundamental shift in the marketplace, it's going to happen again. And it's almost the nature of the beast. So perhaps enterprises need to be the ones to adapt because it doesn't seem to be changing. And it's in their best interest to have this shit as stable as possible.
Yeah, okay, but this is different than patching your stuff for updates and like bug updates and security updates. This is Angular 1 to Angular 2 is a massive
totally
rewrite.
I know, I get it.
And Angular 4 is another massive rewrite.
And it could be tens of or hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in development time. It's
probably like $100 and something thousand, right? So this is like our going on GitHub or Bitbucket and just like deleting the repo and starting over. It's not the same. See, people beat up on the enterprise. Oh, you need to update your Java or PHP. This is not that problem, which is, you guys are right. That is a problem. This problem is these applications, because of the way enterprises work, they have all these hidden features that nobody knows about until you're doing it.
Oh, boy.
Cost a ton of money and time and effort to develop. And you can't just throw shit out. And they have to recoup. The people who say that the enterprise is crazy are the same people who you look at something and say, oh, I could have done that in a weekend. I assure you it's not true.
I completely agree. Having been there and seen some really crazy esoteric stuff that's been built for some old business use that is unique to them, and having literally every single one of my clients I've ever had has that. So it's very common. And the bigger the company, the more esoteric it is. Like, the biggest one I can think of is a messaging system created by IBM that did some sort of packet messaging to the System 390 and then would translate it from the System 390's output to something that a Windows-based system could read. I can't even remember the details anymore because it was so long ago. I used to be intimately familiar with it. It was kind of funny. And then we had to lacquer layers of applications on top of that to communicate to that IBM software. And every vendor that came in essentially had to build an interface to that thing.
Yeah, I just had a huge pain in the ass project where we were upgrading Rails 2 apps to Rails 5. But the catch, which by the way in itself is awful, but the catch is they were using legacy Oracle databases that Active Record no longer supported.
Yeah, of course.
So like, there's all kinds of crazy stuff that had to be done there. But we got it done because you know why? At least the Rails team didn't burn the freaking house down.
Is this the case for even more abstraction? Just is some you have, because we are abstracting now the ops layer. So that is pretty much, if you do a modern implementation, you can pretty much abstract that away, and the base system can be patched and changed, and the contained system doesn't get altered. And then on top of that, it seems like what we need now is, I mean, I'm never an advocate for this, but I'm just playing devil's advocate. It seems that perhaps it's a call for abstraction here.
I'm going to say no. I have reasons. One of them is Xamarin Forms, but
fair.
Like in the JavaScript space, because really we're talking like enterprises are using intranet web apps, right? The way HTML5 has evolved, and like the DOM in particular, is you actually don't need a ton of stuff if you don't want it, right? Like, a lot of the things you used to like need jQuery for, you can totally do with like pure ECMAScript now. So I would say you need less abstraction. Like, if the DOM or the web is your native platform, let's just call it the browser, even though I hate when people say that because there's like more than one browser.
But anything that's getting rendered essentially by a browser engine could be that.
I mean, like, mobile is like a different thing.
A lot of mobile apps are just apps that are being rendered by the web browser.
I know. I write them all the time, right? Like, in most cases, I still think that's the right answer because, it's funny. Like, beginning of the show, or 20 minutes ago, you were telling me, like, why don't I just stand on a soapbox and advocate for open standards? Well, the truth is, 90% of the time, that's what I do. Like, I end up selling the FLOSS solution because it actually, and not because I'm like a hippie, but because it makes business sense for my customer. Right?
Why is that? Is it because of maintenance costs? Is it because of vendor lock-in?
Let's take the shittiest PhoneGap app, right? From like 4 years ago. It might look like crap, but it still runs today. Because it's running, if it's written with web standards and not a bunch of plugins, it still runs. Yeah. You just need to recompile it for the 64-bit architecture on iOS. So update Cordova and recompile it. obviously you need to like do things to the UI. I get it. Like it's not a good app, but it runs. And that is an open solution.
That sounds like most enterprise apps, actually. Usually the UI is a little hokey, but it runs. And
I have a bias towards the enterprise, so I'm like, well, I mean, I'd like to deliver nice looking apps to the enterprise, but I also understand that you mentioned maintenance cost. A lot of enterprises have web developers on staff that can maintain this after, I ride off into the sunset. But they don't have Swift developers, right? Like they don't have Kotlin developers. Nor should they. Like it just doesn't make sense for their internal like inventory management or whatever it is application.
Yeah.
And like we talked about fighting the tide. The tide is that the web standards, despite W3C's interesting choices on DRM, which we haven't talked about, but are odd, are actually getting better every single quarter. Like the things I can do in a browser on mobile today, I wouldn't have dreamed about in 2010.
Yeah, it's
like just maps.
Like even
just mapping.
I was going to say even maps are like something like even docs even or photos.
I would say even like doing effects on photos. I would have told I'm sorry, you have to go double native.
I agree. I think it's I mean, you know me, I'm never the web app guy, but like I look at right now, I'm using the Discord app, the Slack app, the IRC Cloud app, and I'm using Google Docs to do this show.
Say you're not a web app guy, but how many Electron apps are you probably using?
I mean, that's just it. It's again, you cannot fight the market tide.
I mean, I basically live in VS Code now, and that is an Electron app.
When I build a system, I'm going to build it with the understanding that I'm going to devote gigs of RAM to Electron apps and Chrome. And I'm going to build for that.
Oh, you gotta try Firefox Quantum though.
I am playing around with Firefox. It is getting good, my friend. It is getting really good.
Awesome.
Yeah,
it's so fast.
Yeah. Angela recently upgraded from the old version to the new version, and then she went and disabled like the one extension that was like blocking the new suite rendering, the multi-process rendering. She disabled that extension, and she says like it went from something like 50% CPU usage down to like 20% CPU usage when she's got like a few pages rendering and stuff. It's a pretty good drop.
Yeah. Can I take a System 76 detour here?
Sure. You know how much people love that. They really love it when we do that.
But I'm just updating my review, and I have to write this up. I stopped using Chrome, went to Firefox Quantum, which I think is now the main version of Firefox, right? It just got released. And I did a quick firmware update. Without the firmware update, my CPU fan went right down. With the firmware update, I barely hear it. Open up Chrome, and I have a small Snoopy-style Red Baron taking off on my desk.
What was the process to update the firmware?
I had enabled proprietary drivers.
Okay. So it came down via the
so
System
it's an issue with the i7 apparently.
And you have that, and you must have the System 76 PPA installed.
I do have the PPA.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, so it sounds like an improvement. It sounds like the combo of the firmware update and Firefox is like a nice.
Well, and just like my general like usage, because I think about like I'm sitting here in Discord right now. I have Slack, which is a Electron app open because I obviously work, right? I have VS Code on another workspace. Most of everything I'm running, other than Firefox, is an Electron app of some kind, right? And Firefox itself is a web browser, so it's got a bunch of tabs open doing God knows what.
Yeah. It is the new reality of like 20. I guess maybe would it be fair to say that 2017 is the year of the web apps? I mean, I know it's been coming, but now it's like even Skype that we're talking on is a frickin' Electron app now. Like this is a Microsoft
I didn't even think
app.
of that. Yeah, Skype is an Electron app.
Yeah,
so.
and I had a conversation off the record, so I can't say much. I can't say who, but with a Skype developer, and there's like 4 other major Electron projects going on inside Microsoft right now.
We should talk offline.
Well, okay, so we got some feedback, and we also have a project pick. So give me a moment here to mention our friends at Linux Academy, a platform to learn more about GNU/Linux and all of the things around it. We just mentioned Azure. That's one of them. AWS, which is complicated as all get out for me. And Linux Academy makes it really simple. You can get self-paced video courses. In fact, you know what? They got a great little video I never play on this show that explains it all.
Whether you're an experienced sysadmin or new to the world of Linux, Azure, and AWS, OpenStack, and DevOps, a sharp skill set is an absolute necessity to succeed. Meet Linux Academy, an online Linux and cloud training platform that uses self-paced video courses and hands-on labs to give you real-world experience for a wide range of skills.
They have all kinds of new content coming all the time, full-time human instructors, learning paths, which are a series of courses and content by their instructors for like specific types of career tracks that you might be interested in, hands-on labs, so you get the scenario-based learning, and then of course if you're going for certifications, they've got certs for that. We recently launched a Linux Academy challenge on our user error program, and one of the ways we can verify that challenge is by Linux Academy's public profiles. You can set up a public profile, which is essentially like a Linux Academy resume up on their servers that you can link in your resume. It's a pretty great service, and here's the best part. You go to linuxacademy.com/coders. You support this show, and you can sign up for a free 7-day trial. Check out the Linux Academy platform, linuxacademy.com/coders, and a huge thank you to Linux Academy for their longtime support of the Coder Radio program. All right, so we have some feedback, and we also have the project. Which one would you like to do first? So you want to end on the pick and do just like jump right?
I'd like to end on the pick, yeah, because I think the pick is a positive note. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the YouTube feedback is not a positive note. I haven't read it. I mean, I have been reading it, but I haven't read I don't think I read the specific one you haven't read.
Relatively negative, yeah.
What do you want to summarize, or should I go read it?
Go ahead and read it.
Oh boy,
I think it's worth a read.
Okay, all right. So you've linked here to it. It appears. Is that true? Let's see. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know how to link to it.
Maybe I sound like a broken record, but I challenge the notion the tech industry is hurting for more people. Is this the one you're thinking of?
Yes.
Okay. He says there are 3 aspects of what's really going on. Number 1, they only want cheap or people that have 5 to 10 years of experience in exactly the sector, so they don't have to invest money to make them better. Geez, there's a lot here. 2, they claim they need much people because it's very effective and cheap way to advertise your company. A job posting in a magazine or website is cheaper than a normal ad. That's a really great point. Number 3, I agree with that because I've seen that. I have seen that myself. Number 3, the companies are often pretty happy if their workers work over hours or burn them out. Even that's short-term thinking. That's what many companies do. So they have to be able to say to their employees to stop complaining that we're searching for more workers, which makes you work less. I guess he's basically saying if they're always looking for new workers and they don't care if they churn through people. It's like TV news, it's fake news. They have to pretend that they search for people, and they take, of course, an extremely cheap and very good people, but only them. So what got you fired up about this comment?
So I am not unsympathetic to this point of view. Like, I actually believe that I'm down in Florida, right? And my many adventures here in Dagobah, we've talked about how maybe first time I came here, it was kind of a technology wasteland. And the second time, it's going much better because I'm older and smarter and all that kind of fun stuff. But I'm on both. I've been on both sides of this table a lot, Chris. Right? Like, I have to go out and convince people that you should hire, Buccaneer, now the Mad Botter, or you should buy our bot or whatever it is, and you should pay us more than $4 an hour because we're, U.S. based, blah blah blah. But I've also interviewed lots of people, hired lots of people, fired some people. Transitioned out is a nice way to say other people, and interviewed tons of people and not hired them. I have never felt that I need to bring in people offshore. Now, part of that's because as a small business, the visa process is cost prohibitive, so it's not really an option for me. But there's also a aspect of, I don't think it's true that there aren't enough developers in the country. And when I say the country, I think it could be any country, but I'm talking about the United States here. And by the way, Plant City, Florida is by no means a tech hub. So it's not like I'm somebody sitting in San Francisco telling you there's tons of, startups running around.
Not yet.
Because we are the Mad Botter is the AI company in this area.
That's good. That's good. Hey, keep it that way.
No, that's good. That has advantages, but also has huge disadvantages.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Fair. Yeah, that is true. Yes.
Because we don't have an ecosystem to work with, and it's just hard, right? I I still think you can hire qualified people. Now, I think part of it involves being flexible with things like remote work, which I did try to go back on, right? I opened an office. I still prefer local people. But at some point, you have to play a balancing game. And also, you have to be willing to hire people who are maybe transitioning to a new career or learning. But as the employer, you should be able to not pay them a lot. Like, it's totally okay to pay them below market if they're learning on the job, I think.
I think what our commenter is talking more about is the large corporations that do it more as sort of a system of churn.
So I think, and we talk about this all the time, but people keep writing in saying that I'm on the side of the large corporations. I'm not, right? I think it's like a psychological fallacy that I could not walk into Microsoft and get a job in the bot team, even though my bot's the only Microsoft bot other than Tay. Fair enough. Tay got lots of press. That has gotten any press, but I would still never be hired there because I don't have a comp sci degree.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
So I think that's ridiculous. And I think they are, for all this talk about inclusiveness, and this is my opinion, not Chris's, so don't turn Chris into the next Robert Scoble.
Wow.
For all the talk about inclusiveness, well, it's another type of bigotry to say, oh, you should have went to Stanford or University of Seattle. You don't have the right background for what we're looking for.
That's true, and the dogs agree too. I've had some experience I have had a couple of interviews with Google, and the conversation stopped immediately when it came to the college stuff because I went right out of school into work, but that also meant that I had a significant body of experience compared to other people my age. And I felt was qualified for the work, but was declined essentially as soon as it was like the second interview both times that the conversation of a degree came up, and after that conversation, I never made it to the third call.
I have this weird phenomenon where there is a certain company in Seattle whose recruiters keep emailing me and inviting me to things, and another company who has an office in New York, who doesn't like the definite article "the." And prefers books with faces on them.
Okay.
So one time I decided, because it was right when I was thinking about like doing Alice. I'm like, you know what? Let me call them. Oh, we love Coda Radio. We love this thing you did. You have this open source thing. I'm sorry, my dogs are barking. And Objective-C and the C++ library. Where did you get your comp sci degree? Like the first question. Like you walked into a restaurant, you want coffee or tea? No. Where'd you get your comp sci degree?
I wonder if maybe what might happen, and it's going to take years, but I wonder if we won't shift back to, and I say back to, an economy where a huge portion of the population is essentially contractor self-employed, which is actually how it used to be a decade ago, or more or less. And so it could shift back to that. And so what you might have is people become their own companies, and then they go work for periods of times for these other companies, and they sort of see multiple companies. They become polyemployed.
One of the dumb things, the way the United States, and this is going to be lame for our foreign listeners, but I don't know if you know this, Chris, but to employ someone out of state is actually incredibly hard, because now you have to file as an operating entity in that state, pay them a tax, and follow their payroll tax rules for that one employee, which means you're paying your accountant whatever his hourly rate is every month for like additional stuff per employee. So what do you end up doing with remote people since they don't come to office and use your equipment? You make them 1099s, right? Like it's the only way to resolve that problem. And weirdly enough, if the government, these politicians come out and say they don't want 1099 staffing, but the way that employment is structured state by state, it's impossible to employ people out of state if you're a small company without racking up incredible overhead. Just forget the taxes, right? Like I'm now in a low tax state, Florida. New Jersey was a high tax state. Just the overhead of paying like a CPA or an accounting firm to do that work for different states, that's significant, right?
Yeah,
you have to make
it is. It's a pain in the ass.
Oh, and if you mess up, you can be dragged to court.
Yeah.
So
this is such a multifaceted problem, and it's a totally different problem for companies like Facebook and Microsoft than it is for the Mad Bot or Jupiter Broadcasting. It's totally different scale problems. So let's end on a positive note, Mr. Dominic has tossed in a pick of the week. It's a project. By the way, links to all this stuff, including I just dropped a link to Pew Research that has some interesting stats about self-employment. All these links and more in the show notes. Go to jupiterbroadcasting.com and look for Coda Radio 281. But Bootstrap plus Vue. That's your intro there. It was a responsive mobile-first project on the web. You tell me about
it's actually really great. So, and this is directly for if you're transitioning someone off of Angular 1 and they're using Bootstrap and they want to go to Vue, which is a more conservative framework. And we should talk about Vue maybe next week. It basically gives you a bunch of Bootstrap components already, or a bunch of Bootstrap components already turned into Vue components. I know that sounds confusing, but
I get it. Bootstrap 4, the world's most popular framework for building a responsive mobile-first site. Oh, the buzz is high on that one, and I love it. And we'll have a link in the show notes, or you can go to bootstrap-vue.js.org. So are you on a Linux box this week, Mr. Dominic?
No, I'm on a Mac. I was writing Swift to my great shame.
Oh, hence the USB-C dongle thing earlier.
Dude, I just want to say, I know we have to go.
Yeah. Well,
why are not all USB to HDMI adapters compatible?
And you also have discovered that not all the Ethernet adapters are the same, or Wi-Fi.
It's for a standards body, I'd like to see some enforcement. Like, you do not comply with the standard, get the fuck off the shelves.
That'd be good. That'd be really good. Well,
I have 3 of these laying here on my desk.
It's a madhouse over there. Tell people in the meantime where they can find your goodness online if they want more Dominic.
Go to @themadbotter_inc and go to @dominuco on Twitter.
Do it. That'd be great. All right, well, join us live next Monday. We're back on Mondays for a bit, and we've missed you. We have some folks in the Discord, but you can join us over at discord.me/JupiterColony for the live show, and jblive.tv for that stream, jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar to get the stream in your life. That's a lot, isn't it? Just go to jblive.tv on Mondays and hang out there. Follow me on Twitter @ChrisLAS, the network @JupiterSignal, and get our RSS feeds, and then you just download the show automatically and don't even worry about the live show. That's probably what I would do. Thanks for being here. We'll see you right back here next week.